we good, recorder? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I should not have two mics. So
You've got
whenever
three.
What?
You've got three.
Oh, I do have three. You're right. Hi, my name is Courtney Jane Hochman, and I am running for school board of USD 383. I am having this event today to have a friendly, cordial Q&A about the campaign or any questions that people have about my thoughts about our district, about our local politics, anything like that. That's what our time is for. So does anyone have a question?
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color. Let's see. I think if I channel Violet, my daughter who is 4, I would say my favorite color is rainbow, which is good because it's kind of indecision. I really like green, like my big cup. Yeah, let's go with green.
Why are you running?
Why am I running? Question from the audience is why am I running? Because I just realized that we do have 2 mics, but if I run over here, then if you want to. Okay. There you go, kind sir.
Why are you running?
Why am I running for school board? I am running for school board because education is very close to my heart. I have lived in Manhattan for 25 years. I came out to go to K-State and I got my public college education here. I also was raised and had a public education growing up, so K-12. I additionally have 3 children in the district, 16, 10, and 4. So I'll be here for a while, and I've been here for a while. And I think that I have a lot of different ideas and perspectives and a different relationship to the district than a lot of people do. And I want to share that. I want to be able to spread different knowledge from different pockets that aren't always represented at the table. You know, if you've seen any of my stuff, my motto is inclusion for success, and usually I am asked about that and I talk about it in terms of student success and feeling included and feeling good in the culture of their school, but it goes beyond that. That inclusion goes into our community, it goes into how I think about making decisions at that board table, not just about our students, but about finances and the best use of those things, the best use of our time, and supporting our teachers and staff and families.
Now just blanked though. Well, talk a little bit about, I know you've been attending board meetings for a while. You see some of the challenges that are currently happening in the board or in the district. What are some of the biggest challenges in front of the district in this next year, couple of years? And how do you envision tackling some of those challenges?
That is a great question. And I do want to start off by saying, yes, I do attend the board meetings regularly, and if I can't be there, I do watch them later. And the difference between watching the board meeting and being on the board, first of all, is that even though we have open meetings, you're not necessarily privy to all of the details. So some questions that I've been asked, I can't answer, and I have to say, well, I don't know, because that's not, you know, easily available information. So I would have to go ask, you know, an administrator or a member of the school board to get that. But that was not your question. But I thought that was important to point out about attending board meetings. But to answer your question, I think recently the biggest conversations and challenges, one that has existed since the dawn of time, is cost and how we spend our funds. This is going to continue to be a challenge, as it was this year, as you were watching, or as I was watching the budget cycle, and anyone who's been following even, you know, just loosely. Our state is really proud of saying that we have fully funded education, our public education in Kansas for the past 7 years. And that is something to be proud of, but there's a caveat. There's an unspoken piece of, well, what about special education? And I don't just bring this up because I have a special education student. First I want to say, because not a lot of people know, special education encompasses everyone from gifted students on one end of the spectrum to high need students that they refer to as low incidence students, like my son Eddie. So it's broad, it's not just the high need students, it's everything in between gifted to high need. The reason I bring this up is because special education is expensive. And so if the state was funding special education to the level that is in the statute, so this exists on paper, that they are supposed to fund 92% of the excess cost of special education. Well, the base cost of special education is enough, but there is always excess. So since this is something that is a high cost, we have to pull from general funds that are supposed to be spread for everybody, and that's what leads to tax increases. If you look at the budget cycle, one of the things that happens at the end of the year, so in June, there's what are called transfers. And so if there are any funds left over outside of the monies that are often referred to about, the district is sitting on all of this savings, which I'll talk about at some point, I'm sure. Those get transferred to places that have shortfalls. Well, there's always a deficit in special education. So, for example, which is point number 2 about complicated things going on. One of the issues that has come up this year to talk about for next year is a cost-sharing agreement between the school district and RCPD to pay for the SROs. Until now, and it will be through this school year, the police department budget covers the SROs that are in our schools. School resource officers, if you are not familiar with this acronym. Well, there are still ongoing conversations and negotiations about what this agreement is going to look like and what the dollar amount is going to be. If it is set the way that they're looking right now and the amount that they're looking right now, we will basically prepay. So from those end of the year transfers that we have funds, we will prepay for that estimated cost of $80,000 as it stands this moment in negotiations. So if you can look at the picture and arrows, instead of being able to reimburse and pay for special education things, we're gonna have to take this chunk of money out of that, to pay for the SROs. Funding is going to be a challenge across the board, whether we're talking about state or federal. The federal government has been contributing about 14% of the funding that we receive. They do not have a statute, but they have a stated goal of 40%. And clearly they are not meeting that, but like I said, it's not a statute, so there's no way to keep them necessarily accountable for that in the same way we could for the state. Another problem with budget is that a lot of people don't know is that we are on a reimbursement cycle. So at the end of the fiscal year, or right before the end of the fiscal year in June, the district receives a repayment of what has been assessed. Well, they don't get their next payment until October, which is why that count day in September is so essential, that we know how many students, how many at-risk students, how many special education students, all of the title students across the board. So the front end of the year is high cost, and the back end of the year is higher reimbursement. But there's still just, our budgets are formed with the expectation of what we expect or should receive from the government, and we're not always certain that how they're going to follow through and what that's going to look like. The other big thing I see coming up, sort of related to the personal electronic devices policy that started at the high school this year, which I've heard from administrators and staff and students that it's going really well. I'm also seeing things like that from stories across the country. So this, this is obviously a good move for culture in general, especially for our youth, is the use of AI and education on AI and how to properly use it and, using it for good and for good educational aims versus using it for things like plagiarism and other academic dishonesty issues. So I think that may be the next policy issue that we see coming out of the high school. To do with funding streams, by attending meetings this year, I've learned a great deal, but not complete and not enough, about the RFID, which now it has escaped my mind what that acronym is for, but...
Radio frequency identification?
No, it's
okay.
the wrong acronym.
Okay.
See, this is what happens when everything is an acronym.
Exactly.
This is where the school district, the county, and the city receive proposals of whether or not to accept projects to build either workforce housing or lower income housing. And so, and decisions about, well, how much of, a tax break do they get, or how many years, and how much potential revenue will come from that. The school district's piece in that is, well, who are they targeting to live in this space, and how many students will that logistically bring in, or logically bring in? So it's, they did have one plan that was evaluated and rejected this year because the county and the city don't really have an agreement on what the intent is, whether that's workforce housing and what that definition is, or low income and what that definition is. So yeah, there are always going to be community decisions that relate to the school district with, the talk of the pool. We do have a swim team. They have no home pool, but mostly everything's going to be about money. And that's how we attract and retain exemplary staff at all levels.
Maybe I should get one of those bags to put my phone in.
This isn't a class.
That doesn't work home.
That's okay. Do you have a question? Would you like to ask a question?
Thank you. I mostly just showed up for support because I definitely support you and I have very similar beliefs as you. And I guess one thing I'd just like to hear you talk about is, I don't know that I've ever heard you publicly state it, but I assume that you're all for free lunches for people who need it at the school level. And just want to kind of hear your thoughts about how we could possibly try to fund that as a community.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you being here. I think that's also a component of why I, still have this meeting today, was to get words out, because even your closest friends might not know all of the idiosyncrasies of what, your stances are. It's like, oh, I know she's for that, but I don't know how she's gonna do it. Back to your question. School meals. Yes, this is absolutely one of the things that is close to my heart. 2 years ago when I ran, part of my platform was trying to get free school meals for all of our students, because Topeka had recently been able to do that. And so I went and visited with our nutrition folks and learned a lot, and learned that that was a very, very lofty goal, if not impossible. And I don't think much is impossible. So it all has to do with the programs from federal programs that give reimbursement. And so the reason why we have the 5 schools, we started with 1, that was 5 were approved, and so that was kind of what my impetus was, having that be a platform item last time, is, well, if 5 schools are eligible, why are we only doing 1? because it seems to, on the surface, you know, it's like, okay, but I needed more information, I needed more context. So I learned that to have the right, you know, the reimbursement from the federal programs, some of which have been cut or are in danger of being cut, the agreements that we have with local farmers supplying to federal programs, you know, are in danger or are changing or just up in the air. So those reimbursement numbers are really terrible. They are very, very low. And so anyone that asks me about this issue, I always try to explain, well, first of all, our nutrition department is not part of our school district budget. They are their own entity, and they are run completely on the reimbursements and the monies that are received for paying lunches. So they run at a deficit. They are doing their best to not raise the prices. They're taking so many complaints about food quality, portion size, you know, and not, you know, and the offerings, when actually our district is actually really awesome, and they often try new homemade items. Not everyone's going to like them, you know, it's not always going to work out, but at least they're trying to offer new and different things. I was really hopeful, as we all were near the end of last year, that the governor was going to be able to get some support, because she wanted to make a change that anyone who qualified for reduced lunch would actually be shifted, and it would be free lunch. So anyone that would be eligible for what now we have free or reduced lunch would all be free, which would have been a substantial improvement. One of the other issues is that one of the ways that student numbers are calculated to figure out who receives free or reduced lunch isn't just straight income. Part of it is like Medicaid recipients. And so with the changes to Medicaid, with the reduction of people potentially, I know these changes haven't gone into effect yet, but we have to be forward thinking and planning. Like, you know, they just passed the 26-27 school year budget. So these are things that need to be thought of. That will decrease the numbers. And so it's important to remember at this moment, we have 5 schools that everyone at the school receives free or reduced lunch regardless, because the percentage is high enough for them to do so based on federal calculations. So if we reduce the number of students who are not eligible for Medicaid, it takes away from those direct certifications, which takes away from the numbers and the percent that's needed to meet that standard. So potentially some of our students in those schools could lose their free or reduced lunches, which I'm very concerned about. I don't know that there is a concrete way that we can do this in the community. I know that I think it's definitely an area where we need to come together and have a conversation about creative ways. I know that I personally have sent many emails to legislators about this, especially because food insecurity has gone up so much from the pandemic, and with the federal government support, we're able to do things like free meals for anyone 0 to 18 over the summers through our schools, but somehow we can't manage to do that through the school year across the country. You know, during the pandemic, you know, we were also still able to get free meals for anyone who came to get them. And so I don't think there should have to be a national emergency for us to be able to feed kids. I recently attended a panel talk with some legislators, and they shared that it is a really hard conversation with their colleagues across the aisle because they're not in favor of feeding kids. And that just blows my mind. And so now feeding children whether in school or through WIC or through food, they don't call it food, SNAP, is now a partisan issue. And that makes me really sad because we know that students can't learn if they're hungry, period. And we know that there are students and families out there that are food insecure, that may be the only hot meal they receive in a day. And that's where things like, for people with the privilege like me, that if we have a snow day, I know I can still feed my kids. And some people don't have that. And if you look at the numbers from like the Flint Hills breadbasket, this is only getting worse. There is greater need, with the cuts across the board from USDA, because people don't know that like USDA funds harvesters funds part of the breadbasket, funds part of Common Table that we have here, a free meal open to anyone who gets there on time. There's once again a scarcity issue. We do the best that we can. And so when people say, but we have all these things in town, like Common Table and the breadbasket, it's like, we have those because we need them. And that need is increasing. And that's problematic. Like, yes, it's great. We can give a pat on the back that, yes, as a community, we come together and we make these things happen. But we need to think about the bigger problem is that why do these people need food? What's going on with jobs and wages and so many, many different pieces? Thank you.
Didn't know I needed to come with a list.
That's the fun part. You never know what to expect. And it's like, I'm going to have an open forum. So, hey.
Sure. Looking at this past week in particular, what kind of role do you think social media can play, should play, maybe in the school board, gathering information, getting feedback from the public, doing outreach, among the public? What kind of role should social media play as far as you're concerned?
So I have a deep relationship with social media, let's say. I am a frequent Facebook user. As far as school district things like running a campaign, I think it's very helpful in a way to put out information about things going on, about meetings, sporting events, accolades that our students are receiving, community needs that relate to the school district, what's going on. A lot of weeks when there have been like those big deal things that have happened at school district meetings, I've tried to like give a breakdown, a Reader's Digest version of like, here's what you need to know about what went on this week. And so I think social media can be great for that. I think that this week, personally and generally, has been a really great lesson to students and adults alike about the problematic nature of social media and the frequent digestion of things on social media, and that people will often misunderstand or assume things about something you say or something you share or something you even click like on. So I think, like many things, it can be a really useful tool, but I think we also need to use caution. I think it's getting to a point where, as this week has shown, it's gotten very divisive, and having honest discourse and having an exchange of ideas is great, but we all also have that kind of safety bubble, whether we're on our phone, in our home, on our laptop, on our iPad, even downstairs at the library on a computer, checking our Facebook, that there's, even with your name on it, there's still some anonymity. I think we're more adventurous, well, or whether you want to say adventurous or risky or what have you, pick an adjective, when we're on that platform. For safety and not having people sign waiver purposes, I'll share with people who will watch this recording, there is a very small group of folks that showed up. There are 4 people and my technology helper. And so that just shows, hey, we're gonna have an in-person event where someone is going to speak that you have to look in the face and ask a question. And so I'm disappointed that the turnout was low and people were not here to ask questions. They'll have the opportunity to hear the questions that were asked, but I feel like there's so many more things that people do want to know, but they want to know it from the safe zone of their social media. So it's a good cautionary tale.
I wonder if the change in venue was a factor in the lower turnout. I have been trying not to look as much at some of the negativity going on Facebook right now, but I know that we had agreed to host this event at my business, and decided that due to the angry outcry, I guess, of certain local or certain events, we decided it might not be the best energy for that. But I wonder how well people were aware that it had changed, and if you think it'd be helpful to have honest discourse with somebody after this in case they didn't know that the time and place had changed, I'd be willing to go over there and open up, and as long as people are cordial and it's not out of hand, we could revisit that. I just want to have the opportunity for them to ask you questions and for you to explain yourself. And I was frankly shocked when I got here at the low number of people. I thought there'd be a lot more people wanting to hear what you have to say about certain things.
I appreciate you bringing that up because a couple people had asked me, did the proprietor, you, of the business, ask for me to do this? And I said no. I said, I made this decision. I brought it up out of respect for a friend's local business that I don't want to be harmed by this nonsense. It's also a place where there are live animals, so it would not be good to have a high stress event where there are cats. It's also, unfair to the cat adoption group that is also doing amazing work in our community to be harmed by being affiliated with my event after the social media smackdown, blowout, whatever. So I think it points to, that ethic of care. People that don't know me and just know their perception of my opinion of a public figure, which is that's fair. If that's the most important thing to people when they are voting for someone to be on the school board, that's fine. But if they don't take the time to learn about me as a human, to learn about my platform, it's unfortunate for them, but that's their choice. And so that's why I decided to move it instead of cancel it. The good news is that we still have some time before November 4th, or even some time before October 18th, 13th, when early voting starts, because I know there are lots of folks that try to get out and vote early. There are some that are, very ceremonial like me. I like to go on election day. I like to bring my kids. It's a thing. It's a responsibility and a privilege. And I like to model that. My parents modeled that for me. So, in the interest of being a good friend, a good steward to animals, I thought that the move was good. I didn't want there to be a perception or misunderstanding if I completely canceled the event. So I wanted the opportunity to exist. I tried to get the information out as much as I could that there had been a change. But yeah, I do wonder that, but I think it's more my feeling, my opinion, is that it's more about people being comfortable behind their screen. It's the Kansas City team is also playing right now, so there is a priority issue. So thank you to those who like football that have come out today. But yeah, there are other opportunities. There are lots of forums coming up that are hosted by different groups. And so if people are more comfortable coming to an event hosted by a group that they're already involved with or more familiar with or more comfortable with, I encourage them to come out and come to that as well.
Well, the offer's on the table. If you think that you would catch some people that you think it'd be good to speak to, I'm willing to go over there after this and see if there's people showing up still.
Okay, I appreciate that.
When's the first forum?
When is the first forum? The first forum is, let me look at my plan. Or do you want, okay.
I was about to.
It's the one at the senior center. It is in the midday, I want to say. It's the Flint Hills Wellness Coalition. It's 3 different groups, and they bring it to the senior center to give access to folks that go there. I know, because it's somehow, the League of Women Voters will have theirs here on October 4th, but that's still a little ways out. Amber's looking at it.
Yeah, I'm looking up. And of course, Facebook logged me out.
Oh wait, I have my phone. I'm not in school. I haven't had.
There's one at the senior center, 1 to 2:30 p.m. on September 30th.
September 30th,
Yes.
so very soon, at the senior center, and 1 to 2:30? 1 to 2:30 p.m. So I would encourage people that are available at that time. Other ones are on the weekend. I've got a couple more events about me and meeting with people that are on my calendar. Mike, maybe we can set up another thing to do that, because I would love people to meet these awesome cats. I did want to make a comment, because I don't want to keep putting you guys on the spot, which I really appreciate, because those are really good questions. A community member asked me a question on Facebook about, well, what if a Turning Point USA chapter is started on the Manhattan High campus? Would you support that? And they also mentioned my own involvement with True Colors Flint Hills, which is a nonprofit, not on the school. It's an off-school, not school-affiliated environment for LGBTQ and allied youth. So the answer is very simple. The answer is absolutely yes. I support any student-initiated group for students. If students want that on their campus, that's perfect. I believe in the freedom for all groups to exist as extracurriculars. It would be the same as my support of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, or I've just forgotten their title, the Civic Engagement Club that does political things and awareness, or anything, the FFA. It doesn't have to be my affinity group for me to be supportive of it. And so I think that's an important distinction. When when I say inclusion, I mean inclusion. I want everyone's voice at the table. I will bring concerns and constructive criticism and accolades. Let's have some good stuff brought to the table. You know, a community member said blah blah blah. You know, good thing, because that's how we move forward. That's how we model for our youth and the greater community of how we can make these connections, of how we can prepare them to be global citizens and be recognize difference and celebrate the value of that difference, even in a smaller community like Manhattan.
I don't know how to really phrase this as a question. So I'm the parent of an 18-year-old, and they graduated from Manhattan last year. And what I experienced as their parent was a little bit disturbing in terms of how overwhelmed the teachers were with having to support kids who have IEPs and different needs than, I guess, what we characterize as a normal student. My child needed a little extra help and had, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the term. Is it a 504? Yeah.
504.
They literally did nothing. Nothing. And the impression I got from the student, or from the teacher parent conferences, was that they just can't do all of that because they just don't have the resources. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how the district could improve the situation by having more paraeducators or more support for those programs for these teachers, or if there's conversation going on with the school board, with the district, in terms of how can we fix that? Have they identified that problem, and are they working on a solution, I guess would be the question.
That actually is a fantastic question. I prefer the term average because I don't like normal, because what is normal? But I don't slight you for...
That's a better term.
I don't slight you for an accessible word. I have heard this from other folks. And as a SPED parent with a child with an IEP, who is obviously on the other end of IEP and 504 land from your amazing child. I mean, I don't know this man, no, just kidding. Let's be real. It is a problem, and there needs to be accountability there, because things like IEPs and 504s, it's not negotiable. That is a legal agreement. And so, like, in my child's IEP, if he is supposed to get 20 minutes of speech therapy twice a week or whatever, he has to get 20 minutes of speech therapy twice a week. If a student who is mostly mainstream classrooms and just needs the type of para that is in the room as a resource, that's not necessarily identified to be the para of that student who might need some help with, you know, a learning thing, that needs to happen. The problem, and this is not an excuse, but it's difficult to solve, but it needs to be solved, because there's a high level of accountability when you have a legal document, you have a contract that you must do this, is that we need more paras. We need paras to stay, and that's hard. Just this year, I have a very close friend who is a high school para, the level of para that would have worked with your student. And she decided not to come back because, A, the wage.
They pay less than my local retail business does.
Oh, yes. I'm gonna get to numbers in a second, just, you know, for breadth of explanation. But also the culture. I'm hopeful, and I don't think there's going to be a miracle, but I think that removing access to personal devices, constant access to personal devices during learning time will hopefully continue to change that culture in a positive way. But, they were distraught every day when students were fighting with the teacher, not paying attention, derailing everything because devices were having to be policed. So yeah, it's heavy. But we cannot attract and retain good paras, good teachers for that matter also, because of things like culture, if we can't pay them. And at this economic moment, it is very challenging when everything is more expensive. Electricity, your groceries, we all know this. We go to the store and everything costs more. So it's understandable that a person entering the workforce as a paraprofessional at the high school, so if they're just entry level, until recently, that entry level wage was $11.50 an hour. Now, this friend that quit at the end of or didn't come back, I should say. She did not leave anybody in a lurch. She was paid higher than that because she had a college degree, she'd been there for a few years. These are steps that you move up, in any organization. One of the awesome things that is a step in the right direction is that our district was able to raise all of the classified wages by 3%. So that includes paras. However, it's not enough. So in dollar terms, our now starting wage for like a para is $12 an hour. This is problematic on its own, but we also struggle to attract personnel when other nearby districts that offer the same benefit package have a higher starting wage. And so we often lose people to other districts because of that. Even if they have to spend more on gas to commute outside of Manhattan, it's enough of a trade-off to go somewhere else. I also think that aside from trying to have a more livable wage, I won't say living wage, I'll say more livable because I'm a realist, also shows the respect for that job. This is where I try to explain what a para's responsibilities are for that high need, low incidence student, like my son. And this is just one example, because as I've already talked about, there's a resource para who's in the mainstream classroom. So my son is 16. He's non-ambulatory, he is nonverbal. So his para gets him around the building in his wheelchair, helps with his communication device, helps with his scholastic classroom activities, feeds him lunch like you would spooning to a baby, because that's his level. They are also responsible for watching his seizure activity and keeping track of that. They help facilitate other activities that are more social in nature. Relating to peers. He's in the IPS class this year, which is the interpersonal skills. So students from special education or life skills are in a course with mainstream students to create community and bolster understanding and acceptance. So then I get to this part where I usually get some really big highs. They're also responsible for his bathroom needs. So I don't know many people, unless they're a bleeding heart like me, because I would, if my kid wasn't in the high school, he doesn't want me cramping his style, I could do the job of a high need para because I am not uncomfortable with this. but someone is being paid $12 an hour to change my son's brief. And I've heard questions of, oh, well, I thought the school nurse did that. Oh, no. And there's also, you have to have 2 paras to do transports, in and out of his chair for different activities. They assist the physical therapist and the occupational therapist, the speech therapist. He has the vision therapy. So they do a whole lot. And so $12 is really disrespectful. And they're not just there, there's never been, I call it a unicorn. There's never been in the past 13 years that my special education student has been in the district, there has never been a one-to-one para experience. And there are certain needs and medical needs that can warrant that, but it doesn't exist because we've never had the personnel to do that. And so the answer is pay them more, but we can't, something else has to go. And that's a really hard call of what that would be. And so that's a conversation that I think needs to be made a priority, and to get, input from teachers, from paras, from the board, from, globally within the district, to figure out how we can do this and what are we willing to give up. Because what did my dad say? You can't get blood from a turnip. And no one, absolutely no one that I know wants to raise taxes. I do not. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But if you look at our city budget, okay, well, I'm not going to give up the library. I'm not going to give up the fire department. We need the police department. I may have some views about maybe their level of funding, particularly with the school resource officers and who's responsible for what, but that's a different story. Or if somebody wants to ask me that question in a minute, that's fine too. But
it's brewing.
Good, brew away. But what would we give up? I believe, this year, I forget what magazine it was something akin to US News and World Report or whatever. Manhattan High School is the number 11 high school in Kansas. Cool, how did we get there? It's because we have amazing career and technical programs. We have welding on site. We have partnerships with MATC. We have AP classes. We have all these offerings. I won't get into sports. We also have very good sports. I'm proud. I like football. I love sports. I love the dance team. Don't get me wrong. But what are we going to cut? One of the things that I say when, people are challenging the school district budget is, we have things that we are required to do for our students, but we also have these things that historically they are used to and expecting. And so we're not going to be number 11 school if we get rid of some of these things. So I don't know what the answer is, but I would sure love to spend time trying to find it. And I can't do that alone. And if I'm still on this side of the table when all is said and done, I would love to be on a task force to have those conversations. Is it still brewing?
It's percolating up into my brain. I guess I'll start off by saying thank you. I didn't know that the funding with the RCPD was becoming an issue, and I'm a little taken aback because I know that every year after year they keep getting budget increases passed and they keep buying toys. I can't help but remember the movie Stripes with the urban assault vehicle. That, in my view, is one of the toys that we have here, and I don't really see the need for it, but maybe I've missed something that would require that. I don't know. It was a very expensive toy that they bought not too long ago. So to hear that we're prioritizing things like that over our kids, it's a little shocking, and so it's kind of inspired me to look further into that and see, who can I raise that question to? Why can we afford things like that, but we can't have student resource officers funded through RCPD through the city? It just seems like they're trying to pass the buck onto the schools, and we all know the school can't afford it, so it seems like common sense that should be part of their budget. But I thank you for educating me on that.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think that police officers, wherever they're at in our county, because we have county police officers and not city police officers, should be paid with police budget money, because they are sworn officers, they are not employees of the school district.
I mean, they're protecting the citizens who are young,
And they are protecting the citizens who are young.
That's their job description, is to protect the servers. So I just see some irony here.
So this started, as far as I'm familiar, and if I misrepresent, I will go and find out. My understanding was that this came out of the law board, who is chaired by John Mata at this time.
It's coming together now, sorry.
So the idea was that there should be a cost sharing agreement with the district. On the face of that, I don't necessarily have a problem about cost sharing. I have heard that during the negotiations about a dollar amount, that it was whittled down to $80,000 for the two positions that we have for our two SROs. Like I said, it's still in negotiations. I will share that when I learned that it was still in negotiations, because I misunderstood that when it was brought to the school board to vote on, that it was done. And so I was like you, why didn't I hear about this from the beginning? But you can't necessarily follow every committee meeting. And who has the bandwidth?
Or the time.
Or well, yes, practical time. And so I wrote a letter as a private citizen, or a quasi-private citizen. If you're running a campaign, are you really a private citizen anymore? As a taxpayer, how about as a taxpayer? And I sent it to most of the members of the law board, because it's kind of hard to find emails, even their official emails, so that was a challenge. Because they only meet once a month, and I had just missed their meeting. It's also hard to find meeting information, but that's another story. And I received a reply, with all of these questions. It's like, from everything from, I personally feel that this should be part of the police department budget. And part of that is because their revenue stream is quite different than, say, the school district. We get federal dollars, state dollars, and local taxpayer dollars. And that's it. Like, we're not in the business of making money. So their revenue streams are different. Their increase this year was, I believe, $2 million. And the request that, I don't think this part of the negotiation has changed, but like I said, was $80,000. So I made a suggestion to them about, because I always think you should always have an idea to share. It might not be the solution that they choose, and they may choose no solution at all if they don't see that there is a problem. But doing the work and thinking creatively and saying, okay, here's an idea. Why not start at a percentage, like 10%, 20%? It's not dissimilar to the decision made that was changed shortly after that, okay, Parks and Rec is gonna charge a fee now. No matter how you feel about that fee, it should not have been like, hey, we're gonna charge a fee now. Similar to, great organizations and events like Grow Green through the Greater Manhattan Foundation, when they removed some parties from being recipients of that who had already built an expectation into their budget. But I digress, because this is about police. So, yes, they have a substantially larger budget than we do. Like you say, their mission is to protect and serve. That if it's anywhere in the county, that should be their job. I supplied, an idea of a percentage and work it up to whatever the target amount is, okay? And also to be cognizant of the financial moment that we're in and how many cuts were made to educational budgets. And once again, that my personal opinion is that education money should be spent on education. Now, we absolutely need our SROs. This has been evidenced, for years, but it's also salient this week. School shootings, once again, we've become desensitized and had to accept that, when I put my kiddo on that bus, I don't know what's going to happen during their day. We can't sit there and think about that all day, but it's a reality. I received a reply from one member, the chair of the law board, and it had some misinformation in it, and it was very dismissive. And so I would encourage anyone interested in this to, whether you agree with me or not, to learn more about it. And if you feel that they're not going in the right direction, reach out to the law board, try to attend their meeting, email. I think city commissioners can also be a good avenue to approach this to, because they are responsible for who is on those boards to a point. And also it's a whole community matter. A small group, even though they are challenged as the law board, or given the charge to be the law board, it's a bigger picture issue.
Follow-up question, and I don't expect you to necessarily know it, maybe you do, just, anyway, I'm sitting here hearing this, and I wonder, does the mall pay RCPD for the officers that are in the mall?
I think the Manhattan Town Center actually has private security.
I've seen police on duty there.
Okay. I can look into that because I am not sure.
Like I say, it's not really in your wheelhouse.
No, but
just a curiosity.
it's a good question, because one of the other things that was brought up in the reply to my email was, well, a lot of other districts around here do it this way, which I think is not always the answer. There's a lot of things that Manhattan and our school district do because we are unique. And so to say, oh, well, everybody else does it this way, it's about 50-50 across the country that do cost sharing agreements or have it completely on their police department. The other sticky part that I think would take some more conversations with more parties is that USD 383 occupies more than one county. Now, we have Riley County police officers that are assigned SROs because our high school exists in Riley County, but some of our students are in Pot County. So maybe the conversation needs to expand. It's like, okay, what, can we have an agreement where we get one Riley County officer and we can have an officer from Pot County have permission to be here? These are all nuances that I'm not familiar with, but the bottom line is I don't think that the school district budget should be responsible for this, because that $80,000 could go somewhere else. In context, the 3% increase for all of our classified staff, which is, I'm gonna say 250. I know it's between 200 and 300 staff members. That increase cost about $120,000. And so to think if we had that $80,000. We wouldn't necessarily have to put it all in that particular basket, but there's many more things that we could do.
Thanks.
Anybody else? We are at time. I thank you so much for coming out and for your thoughtful questions. We will get this up for anyone who would like to watch it. I will make note of other times that I will be available and attending public forums with the other candidates for school board. But once again, thank you so much.